In this video, we're going to learn what are controllers. So controllers are the one where all the logic happens. Okay, so controllers serve as an intermediate between the model and the view and any other resources that need to process the HTTP request and generate a web page. So if I had to just show you the structure, whenever an HTTP request comes, whenever the user lands on your site on a particular URL, it goes through the route. Route is the one which will decide where actually what view is going to be loaded, and which controller will be handling the request. So the request goes from here to that controller, that specific controller, and we need to specify the controller name in that particular route in web.php, and that controller will decide what will happen in that particular view. So all the logic happens over here. It interacts with the model. Model interacts with the database, gets all the information over here, all the condition, all the checks, all the actions are being performed over here, and the data is being passed to this controller, and that data is being passed to the view. And view is where you have all the HTML content, on the JavaScript going on, CSS going on, and all of that data is being passed and rendered by the view, passed to the view, and it's rendered by the view on the front end. Okay, so that's basically the job of a controller. And as we have discussed in the directory tutorial, understanding directories, the controller directory is basically your project, and then app directory, which is, let me close this one. So you have app directory, inside of this you have HTTP, inside of this you have controller. So the default controller is controller.php, which is this file, and then you can make new controllers inside of this directory. You can create your own directory inside of this controller, and also put your controller file inside of that if you want to specify them to make sure that it's easy for you to find them later on. For example, all the auth, the login, register, reset password, forgot password have been put by default by Laravel in the auth directory. Similarly, you can create your own directories and put your controller files inside of them. Okay, great. Next thing, like I said, default file is controller.php. We write the controller in Pascal case, guys, and the name should be plural. For model, it's singular. For model file, it's singular, and for controller file, it's a plural one. So, for example, if it is post controller, it should be posts controller, should be the name of the controller. Okay, so Pascal case is a subset of camel case where the first letter is capitalized. That is, user account is a camel case, and user account is Pascal case. So we're going to use the Pascal case and not camel case. Camel case is usually used in the JavaScript, but we're going to use the Pascal case, which is basically also used to name the classes. Okay, so similar format used. So we'll use the Pascal case, which is this one. The first letter will be capital, and then the next word will also be capital, and the rest of them is small. Great. Now, like I said, Artisan, which is the CLI of the Laravel that provides us different methods, different terms that we can use, different keywords that we can use to perform certain actions. So we can go ahead and create a controller if you want to manually, by going over here and putting the name of the file as just one second. Let me just delete this one accidentally. Okay. All right, so manually I can do posts controller.php, and that would also do. But then what's the point of Laravel providing us so many functionalities using Artisan? Let's use that as well. And in near future, you will come to know why we would use the Artisan command, CLI, Laravel CLI, in order for us to create these controllers and models. Just because it makes our job a lot easier. It's going to write if we just create the file, then we have to write everything manually. But if we use the command line, it's going to go ahead and put all the name spacing, the function, all of that automatically. So Laravel makes our life a lot easier by using those commands. So what is the command to create a controller? It's very simple. It's called PHP Artisan. So let me just type that, PHP Artisan space make colon. What do you want to make? Controller. So you write controller, and then the name of the controller. So like I said, it has to be plural and it has to be Pascal case. So if I want to make a controller called posts, it will be posts, the name of the controller, and then controller at the end. So it'll be the name and it should end with the word controller. So make sure you end it with the name controller. You click on enter, and sure enough you can see controller created successfully. And now if you go back and check, you can see automatically this has been created. Okay, so if you just open this, you can see all of these functions are there, but obviously not showing over here. But you can go ahead and define your functions. Post controller is extending controller. Controller is actually our default controller. So I just want to show that to you. Let me just open up. This is the default controller, this is extending base controller, and our own controller, post controller, is extending the controller file, which is a class, which is this one. This is the namespacing. So what are actually these namespace? So guys, namespace are a way of encapsulating items. For example, directories serve to group related files and act as namespace for files within them. So PHP namespace provide a way of grouping related classes, interface, functions, and constants. So controllers basically defining namespace as controllers basically grouping things together so that we can understand that all of these controllers are for that particular job. So basically that's why the namespacing is used to encapsulate items. Okay. Now comes the resource controller, guys. So if I had to go ahead and write all of these functions, it obviously would consume a lot of time. So for example, I had to write index and then write a function over here, so and then define another function over here. Okay, so in Laravel, if you want to perform a CRUD functionality, which is basically create, read, update, and delete, you can perform that. And Laravel makes the job a lot easier by providing us with a resource controller. So what is a resource controller? If you want to create a resource controller, all you have to do is just type the same thing but add a resource flag next to it. So double dash and then resource. Okay, let me just delete this one first. Okay, great. And you hit enter and you can see the controller successfully created. So what will be different in that? What will be the difference between the normal way of creating a a controller and by adding a resource flag? So by adding a resource flag, what it does is basically it provides us with different set of functions. You can see you have index, you have create, you have store, you have show, edit, update, destroy, all of that. Okay. And all you have to do over here is come to your web.php, and rather than writing different routes for each of these functions, you can just write one function to create a route for that. So I'll just show you what I mean. Okay, so if you want to write a route, we'll do a get request, and let's say it goes to let's say home URL. Okay, if you want to go ahead and use a controller for that request, you just need to write the name of the controller, posts controller, and then you do at will be, and after add you'll write the name of the method. So if I want to call this particular method at that particular URL, then I'll just write the name of the method. So the name of the method is basically index, and if I do like this, or even if I just don't put anything over here, by default it's going to use the index method. Okay, so there are both ways. Either you define at and then the name of the function that you want to call. For example, if you want to use a different function create, then you'll do at create over here. But if you don't define anything like this, it will automatically call the index function provided it's there in the controller. So what would happen now inside of this function? Let's say I will just do a return, this is index, and let's see what happens. sorry. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to go ahead and create a route, which means if I go on to the home directory, remember this slash sign is for the home directory, and if then root directory, and then if I go on the home slash home, and let's see what happens. So this is my root directory, and then I go on to home and hit enter. Okay, call to undefined function get. Okay, let me see what's going on there. Okay, post controller. Let me check. Okay, so I think I missed a colon over here, and I think we do need to put add index because that's not functioning. Okay, so if I put add index, and now if I go ahead and refresh it, sure enough you can see this is index, and that is what is being displayed by this function. Okay, but imagine if we had to create different routes for each of these. Obviously it would consume a lot of time. For example, if I had to do it for let's say this create method, then I have to write another route over here like this. Okay, and then let's say this goes to home create or something, you know, this URL, and then I have to do create over here to call on the method. Okay, so if I do that, and let's say return create, just returning some string, and if I then go to that URL home slash create, you can see that is opening, but that is very time consuming, guys, you know, to go ahead and define each router. Remember that for one controller, if you have so many functions, you know, half of your file will be filled if you have like 5 or 10 of them in a big project. So to make our life easier, what Laravel provides us is this resource flag. Okay, so by going ahead and defining a controller with a resource flag, it actually allows us to go ahead and create one single route which will create multiple routes. So if I define over here as resource instead of get, and then I don't need to actually mention at over here. What will happen is it will be equivalent to route get post controller at index plus route get post controller dot create route post, all of that stuff basically. So all of those functions will be defined by defining a single route, okay, using a resource keyword over here. Okay, so let's check how that is functioning. So remember in the previous videos we mentioned that if I want to check which are the routes available in my site, all I have to do is just type php artisan route list, and this is the command that you're going to be using all the time, guys. So this is going to be like on the tip of your tongue. Perfect. So if you look at it now, this is my post controller. Let's say action. Name of that is home.index. So if I go to home with a get request, it's going to use the index one. If I go ahead and go to home with the post request, which means I have a form which has got a method of post, and if I'm trying to submit a form at this particular URL, then this will go to store method which is over here, and then I will have the request variable available which will contain all the $_post you know, variable data which we can then use to, you know, store that information into the database or do whatever we want there. Okay, and then it will also provide the get request on this URL, which is home root URL slash home slash create, will give us access to this function which is create. So that will actually call create function, which is here, which is basically to show the form for creating the new resource. So this function we will use to load the view for the form where the user will enter all of the data, and once the form is submitted, it will go to the store method with the post request, which is this, and then here is where we will perform all the action for the for that particular form using the request variable, okay, which will contain the $_post data. Okay, and similarly then we have the get request with the show function, which is basically for displaying the specific resource with a particular ID. If you want to display one particular data with that particular ID, we can use this function. And then we have the put patch, which is basically to update something. Again, it allows us to get the request variable containing the $post data and the ID also for that specific resource. And then you have the delete method, which gives me access to the destroy method. You have to obviously pass an input variable with name as _method and value as delete for it to function. And this will basically take to destroy, and this is basically used to delete something in the database. Okay, and then you have the get request to edit something as well, which also provides us with the let's say edit this one. Yeah, for editing a specific resource, that provides us with the ID of that resource. Great. So whenever you pass that in the URL, ID will be available. So this all the information, you will be able to get that in the next videos, guys, how to do it. This is just a basic overview of what the controllers are, how do they function, what is the benefit of using resource controllers. If you're if you want to do just a basic job, just to load something, one particular thing, then you might not really need the resource. So sometimes it's also wise to decide whether you actually want to create a resource controller or not. It may not always be feasible to create a resource controller, otherwise you're just going to flood the routes. For example, for every small thing, if you start making resource controller, just imagine how many routes it will be created over here. So even if you want to search something, then you have to keep scrolling down to find that information. So we need to be very logical in deciding whether what that job is going to do. Are we actually going to delete, update, store, and all of that stuff, or the job is just to display something? If the job is just to display something, then you may not want to create a resource controller. You just create a normal controller using the command php artisan make controller and the name of the controller. Otherwise, if you need all of that functionality, then you use the php artisan make controller post controller and you add the resource flag over there. Okay, now so I think I have pretty much explained that to you, how it works. And obviously at this moment what we've done is we're just returning something, but this job of the controller will just not be to return something, but we can actually load a view over here. So how do we return a view over here? All we have to do is basically just to return a view function like we were using in the routing. So remember, in the over here we are using this function, so we use the same function here as well. Okay, so it's return view and then the name of the view. Okay, so name of the view will be, let's say I want to load the about.blade.php. So where does the about.blade.php resides? It resides inside of the about directory. Remember, this will give access up until view, and we have to mention the path from there. So it resides inside of the about directory and then the about. So it's about. You can either do about/about, or you can just do about.about. Okay, and now if you go and check, if you go ahead and go on to the home route, remember, if you check over here, the index function is actually going to the home route with a get request. Okay, so if I go on to the home route with, then it will actually, okay, remember in the about.blade.php we were printing a data. Obviously this will not be available because we are not passing anything, so let's get rid of this and we'll just say this is the about page or about view for that matter. If you refresh the page, sure enough you've got the about view over here. Okay, if you want to pass the data, you can pass the data also, like we've learned in the previous video. If you want to pass some data, all you have to do is you can pass it in the controller as well. So let's say if I have something like name, okay, Imran, and you can use the compact function or other functions to go ahead and pass that data. So I will use the compact function, that's the most common one. And remember, we just need to put the name of the variable and not actually the $sign. So we'll just put the name of the variable, which is name without the $sign. And now if I go to that particular view that we are loading, which is about.blade.php, all we have to do is just use the template engine to double curly braces to echo out, and then we just go ahead and say the name of the variable over here, and that will give us the value of that variable. So we were expecting Imran to be here. Great, he's here. Great, perfect. So I think that's pretty much it regarding the controllers. Okay, I hope you did like the video. If it was informational, fruitful, please do subscribe to my channel and share my videos with others. You can also put your comments down below if you have any questions. And in the next video, we'll discuss models. See you in a bit. Bye-bye.